Welcome to the Dental Brief, the world's direct, right-to-the-point podcast produced to get you the information you need to learn and grow your practice. To learn more about our guests and find links to information discussed on our show, visit our website, dentalbrief.com. On to today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dental Brief. I am back with our guest today, Bob Brooks. Bob Brooks is a transition advisor based in Ohio. Bob has a ton of experience. He was on our show prior talking about evaluating a practice when you're looking at buying one. Now he's back, and we're thankful that he's back for Part B to talk about valuing your practice when you're ready to sell. Hello, Bob. Thanks for coming back.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to jump into this, Bob. Let's just go right for it. Let's talk about valuing a practice when you're ready to sell. What that looks like. Start from the top and take it from there.
Okay. Well, I guess the first thing is you need to think about who you want to work with to help establish a value.
Okay.
So, a natural choice might be a CPA, but I will tell you that CPAs, just like attorneys, their goal is to control risk for their clients. And they look at things like balance sheets. I've got a practice listing over near Pittsburgh right now, and I keep getting these balance sheets from the CPA. And, the biggest value of a practice is the goodwill. It's usually like 70 or 80% of the value of a practice. You know how much goodwill is on a balance sheet, on a
Sure.
net worth statement? Zero. Okay.
Explain what you mean to that by goodwill. Explain that to me.
Okay. Well, this is an intangible. Just like no matter who the dentist is in a practice, the patients are going to go to that practice because they're used to going to that practice. And of course, they're all kinds of flavors of that, all kinds of degrees. Hopefully you have good patient retention, and a lot of the patients will go to the buying dentist to see the buying dentist once the practice is sold. And some of them won't. If there was a dentist that had poor communication skills or made a lot of changes in the practice or let the staff go or, some of these unfortunate things. But that goodwill is an intangible. It's not a hard asset like the dental chairs. It's not like the hand pieces. It's not real estate. It doesn't have any tangible value. It's all intangible.
Got it.
Well, so just to continue, I would say that traditionally practice brokers, some of them try to get listings by telling a seller that they will put a higher number on a practice. And that's really kind of a unethical way to get business because they know a practice won't sell for that. So, it's important to work with a practice broker who can put a realistic number on the practice. And I don't lose any sleep over those type of situations. If I lose listings because somebody comes in with a ridiculous number just to get a listing, then they'll eventually be calling me someday.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that sellers need to be aware of that. The other thing is, if you build a really strong foundation for the value of a practice, you should be able to sell practices for the list price. We've found that most of the practices that we list sell for list price. And it's not because we undervalue them. I mean, in fact, I compared, and there are some other brokerages that probably do as well or better. But I know for our particular situation, which is the only thing I can speak to, our average sale prices are 125.3% of the average of dental practice sale prices nationally in the nation's largest online business listing for practices that sell between $400,000 and $2 million. So it doesn't mean that you have to give up money to get a good valuation. It just means that you're going to build confidence in the buyer's mind if you come in with really strong information. And so all the questions that a buyer could ask, it's good to have all those answered up front, because if a seller doesn't answer all those questions up front, it may appear to a buyer like, well, if you're trying to hide this and I had to ask about it, what else are you trying to hide from me? So it's important to go through, and if you see aberrations like, well, why did the dental supplies spike this year? And why did they spike in 2018? Or why did your professional fees go way up last year? Or uh, why is your lab bill so high? Or, all these questions, if you answer them, if anything is out of line, if you just simply answer it up front, it will help build confidence in the buyer's minds.
Sure. I have to imagine too, and I think that this can even relate to the price of a practice. I have to imagine it can help alleviate some stress down the road too, right? So if you address an issue right now, it doesn't pop up 2 days before you think you're closing and ready to jump on your yacht to cruise around the world, right?
Right.
I have to assume that you can mitigate a lot of that stress risk. And I know for myself personally, this is something that I'm focusing on as I'm getting older, is eliminating stress from my life. So I would also think too, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that if you're trying to sell a practice for more than it's truly worth, some stress has to come involved there too, right? Longer listing times, maybe more issues with a bank not wanting to fund it, maybe more red flags coming in for a seller later down the road. Are all those things true?
All those things are true and even more. For example, the risk is much higher that your staff or your patients will find out that you're trying to sell your practice the longer that it's on the market, and it will be on the longer market if it's overpriced to begin with.
Sure.
Some sellers think that, they've been watching The Price is Right on TV, or they've been watching these, home improvement shows where somebody makes offers on houses or something, and they think, well, I'm going to come in 10% too high, so it gives me room to negotiate.
Yeah.
Well, everybody has to pick their own strategy. That's not generally the strategy that we go with. In fact, if I can't agree on a listing price with a seller, I won't take the listing. There's no reason to overprice a practice. You should be able to get full price if you do a good job of supporting that price. And I thought I might get into the 3 ways to establish value on a practice if I could, Patrick.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want that. Please do.
Okay. Yeah, the first way is the income method. So, one traditional way is people say, well, what did a practice sell for? And what they mean is, what percent of collections did it sell for? Well, people look at that number, but it's not a good way to value a practice. That is an income method. Another method is to take the seller's discretionary earnings, which is basically the net income of the practice after you normalize the financial statement, and the broker will do that, where they add all the expenses that should be in there, that maybe the dentist owns the building and they don't pay themselves rent. Well, the practice buyer, even if they buy the building, they're going to have a real estate expense, right?
Sure.
On the debt repayment. And so some expenses actually get added in, and there are other expenses that come out. Things like, $6,000 to a particular charity, phones for all the kids, all kinds of expenses that are extraordinary expenses that aren't really practice expenses that were taken out with the IRS, but they're not really expenses for the buyer. Once all that happens, if you take that number, seller's discretionary earnings, and use the multiples of 1.5 to say 2.25, depending on a number of different factors, that gives you a range of where the practice value would be, or what we call most probable selling price. And then the best method, and this method works 80% of the time, and I know I mentioned CTC Associates previously, and we certainly appreciate all the help they've been to the International Business Brokers Association, a method they use and many other brokers use around the country. And that is, you look at, you assign a value to the collections of the dentist. So let's just say the seller is an imaginary associate in the practice. You take collections from their work, multiply it times traditional compensation for an associate. Let's just use 30% of collections. You subtract that from the seller's discretionary earnings, and you end up with a number which is kind of like adjusted EBITDA. You've heard of EBITDA before. So adjusted EBITDA, or excess earnings. So you take that number and then you divide that by a capitalization rate. And that capitalization rate is determined by a number of different factors that a broker can help with. And that's how you can establish most probable selling price with the income method. The second method is the asset method, which is just what's the value of the hard assets in the practice, and that's not practical. And then the third way to value a practice is with market data. So there are a lot of services that are available that have data from practices that have sold. And I even use a general business multiplier from the Market Pulse reports, Pepperdine University, and they have a business school there that generates market multiples for thousands of businesses that sell in the United States. Dental practices are way more successful than general businesses. What is it, like 9 out of 10 restaurants fail?
Right.
So you would think that dental would have a higher multiple than general business. But even if you just use the general business multiple of sellers' discretionary earnings for dental practices, that actually establishes a very strong foundation for the value or most probable selling practices of practices. So, we use these 3 different systems. Income we do use in several flavors of that. Asset is not used, and then market data we pull from a couple different sources. So that's a really good way to build a good foundation for establishing most probable selling price.
Follow-up question for you, right? This is not necessarily related to valuing a practice. More so when to start looking for someone to work with when you know that you're going to sell your practice. And let me just say that I've actually seen practices where they're like, all of a sudden today it's we're recording this in September, and they say, hey, I want to sell my practice the first of the year. Is that too late to start working with the transition expert, or should it be something you back into a couple years before you think you may want to sell? When's the right time to start working with a broker?
Well, I became a certified exit planning advisor because I thought working a few years ahead of time was a good idea.
Sure.
But most practice sellers don't want to do that.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do you think that is? If you had to speculate,
well,
or maybe
I'll tell you, I work with some great people. I can think of somebody like Denise Logan out of Scottsdale. She's called the seller whisperer. And there's a lot of psychology involved with selling a practice, because a lot of times the dentists have their own identity wrapped up in their job. A lot of their relationships are with patients and with staff. They don't know what they're going to do with their time once they retire. It could be in most practice sales that sale price is not the most limiting factor. It could be all these other factors that are somewhat intangible.
Yep.
So I think that the pride and a lot of the factors that help a dentist be a good business owner actually work against them as they try to sell their practice or think about selling their practice, because there's mortality. Everybody ends practicing dentistry someday, and so they just want to put that off and they don't want to address it.
Yep, makes sense to me. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. We've got a minute or two left. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I would say that it's very hard to get practice deals done in less than 45 days. You asked about timing, Patrick.
Sure.
90 days is more common. By the time all the most probable selling price is established, you have all the practice data, the marketing occurs, you have dentists to get into practice, you have letter of intent, then you have closing. 90 days is probably fairly quick in a lot of cases. So
sure.
Advanced planning can help somebody maximize their sale price. And a lot of times I have dentists say, well, I don't want to move fast. I just want to move slow, the sellers. If you want to move slow, plan ahead. If you want to move fast, wait till you have a triggering event. You'll have a heart attack or something else unexpected will happen. Then you'll have to move fast. So you want to move slow, plan ahead, and start now.
Makes sense. Bob, that's great advice. Thank you for coming on our show. Folks, please feel free to check out Bob's website. You can find it at practiceendeavors.com. Excellent resource to the dental industry and community. We thank you, Bob. Thanks for coming on.
Happy to do it, Patrick. Bye
Take
now.
care.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Did you know you can weigh in on today's topic on Facebook? Search The Dental Brief on Facebook or visit our website, dentalbrief.com, and just follow the link. We look forward to having you join us again on another episode of The Dental Brief.